Today I'm going to show you how to get the 75mm throttle body on your 350Z for less than half the cost of what's currently out there. No matter which car it is, it seems that adding a larger throttle body is always a popular modification. Whether it's an LS motor or my E39 540, they're always trying to put a bigger throttle body on the intake manifold because that's the only way the air is going to get to the engine. So that is a bottleneck that you're going to have to take care of if you want to make big power on any engine. On Nissan 350Z, it comes with a pretty small 70mm throttle body. The throttle body blade is smaller than the intake tube, and eventually it will become a limiting factor on these cars, along with the plenum neck behind it. A lot of people say that these don't help, that these don't make power, and their problem is they're putting it on a stock motor. So it's not a limiting factor on a stock motor. But once you start adding a better plenum, a plenum spacer, a lower plenum, an intake, an exhaust, headers, test pipes, a tune, eventually it will become a limiting factor, and it will be one more step, especially if you start going even more extreme with cams or a higher compression ratio or a stroker. And it's obvious that this was considered a bottleneck because with the HR motor, Nissan decided to go with two 60mm throttle bodies, which is dramatically more area than one 70mm throttle body. So while the difference between 70 and 75mm does not sound like that big of a difference, here is a comparison on the left of the stock throttle body and on the right of the newer, larger 75mm one. You can see just how much more area there is around the outside, because when you're adding diameter, you're adding the amount of area squared, so it makes a big difference. Here's another shot of the two overlapping. You can see that one has a squared centimeters of 3,847 versus 4,416. That is almost a 15% increase in cross-sectional area versus the only small increase in diameter. It's a lot bigger difference, and 15% is a pretty big difference in diameter, so this modification really is worth it. The only good option for an upgrade out there is the 75mm throttle body that Nissan used on the 2010 Nissan Maxima. And while these throttle bodies are extremely similar to the one that comes on the car, there are a few changes that need to be made to get it properly installed. First, you're going to need an adapter harness because they use two different types of plugs. As you can see, there's a long, narrow plug on this throttle body, while if you know, the regular one has more of a square plug, so you're going to need an adapter harness. So this is the stock 350Z plug. You have this harness which plugs in and then comes over to this new plug. So it just goes in between. All the wiring is the same, so if you want to, you can wire it yourself, or you can use the link below. It's like $60. It makes it super easily reversible, and I haven't had a single issue with it in over 4 years of use. The next problem you're going to have to address is the throttle body does not use the same bolt pattern as the smaller throttle body. So in the case of my carbon fiber plenum, I was just able to put on a custom plate for attaching it to the car because it was purpose built to have this larger throttle body from the get-go. But to get it on the car, you're going to have to use an adapter plate. Here is the original plenum off my car, and I still have the adapter plate on there. It is a 1/4 inch thick piece of aluminum that I cut out. The hole for the throttle body adapter is 75mm in diameter, just like the throttle body. It's not an exact circle, it's a slight oval. I then bolted that to the plenum and ground down the inside of the plenum to port match it to the new throttle body to get a nice clean flow. Now while you are losing the diameter of the 75mm as you go down to the smaller size of the plenum, as it compresses down to the smaller diameter, you're picking up velocities. So what you're losing in volume, you are regaining some in increased velocity. With the paper gasket removed, you can see how I attach this to the plenum. I've got countersunk screws that are going through the throttle body spacer to the actual plenum, and then I have 4 different tapped holes that are for the throttle body. Now as you can see, it's not 100% perfect. This screw on this bottom corner just won't quite fit, and then I had some extra holes for where the first time I tried it, it just didn't quite work. an extra one up here. So you're going to have to plan this out perfectly to get it just right. So you just have to be extra careful to get these 4 holes all perfectly centered, and then drill and tap all these holes. You have a little bit of leeway with these holes because the M6 bolt is a much smaller than the actual hole through the throttle body, but it's really not that difficult. You can get away doing this with a hand file, a jigsaw, a drill, and an M6x1 tap. You also need a countersink bit to get these in there, but I ran this on my car for 2 years without any issues. All I had to do was put RTV behind here, bolt it down, put some RTV on here, bolt the throttle body to it. 0 issues. It worked perfectly fine. They do sell a pre-made adapter for this. It's going to be a lot more expensive than the $10 or $15 you're going to pay for a chunk of aluminum. You're going to have to put a little bit more time into it, but it is an enjoyable project. You can get this Hitachi throttle body brand new off of Amazon with free Prime shipping for less than $110. It's $106 right now on Amazon. There's a link in the description. This exact throttle body was from a 2010 Nissan Maxima. It is a Nissan OEM throttle body that someone figured out you could use on the 350Z, and it is selling it at a markup because they found it. Well, I found it too, and here it is at cost, saving you a ton of money. Then you're gonna have to do the throttle body plate like I mentioned. You can pick up a piece of aluminum anywhere off the internet for pretty cheap. It just needs to be at least a 1/4 inch thick. You're going to need approximately a 3 inch by 3 inch square. I would go a little bigger just to give you some room to work. I would just go ahead and go for the cable. I think it's worth the $63. You could of course do it yourself, or you can hardwire it yourself. However you want to set it up. It's not that difficult, but I think it's worth it for the ability to reverse it easily, to put the old throttle body back on if you want to go back to stock. It makes it a lot easier of a modification to just go ahead and buy the cable. But even then, you're still coming out at less than half of what it costs to buy the kit assembled by somebody else, and you're getting the exact same quality of parts. So while a lot of naysayers say that this mod is not worth it, it loses power, it doesn't work, it's not a good usage of money, for the price that I am offering it to you, buying this throttle body directly for Amazon for barely over $100, buying just the wire for $60 or even making it yourself for less, and then of course doing the DIY aluminum adapter plate, it is not that much money. It is way less than half of what you would get it from other places, whether you're buying the complete kit or pieces of it. It's going to be a lot cheaper, and this will eventually become a bottleneck. For those of you who just have an intake and exhaust, it's probably not worth it. But if you're starting to get to the top of the mod list and you're running out of things to do, you have an intake, you have an exhaust, you have cams, you've got a plenum spacer, you've got headers, you're running out of things to do to improve the car, this is a great way to remove a bottleneck. You can move on to the next problem. I believe wholeheartedly that one of the reasons that my car does so well at high RPMs, where normally DEs are starting to drop off at 62 or 6300 RPM, I'm not dropping off until 72 or 7300 RPM, and I really believe it is because I have the larger throttle body and I have the larger neck to allow it to breathe when it's getting up to those high RPMs. I've had 0 issues with this setup. It's worked perfectly through many track days, through a lot of daily driving, and it solves a problem for the 350Z. There's only one option out there, and it is this. You cannot bore out a 350Z throttle body because they are very picky. If you send it out to get bored, you're only going to get about 72.5 millimeters, so it's still going to be smaller than this, and it's probably not going to work. You're going to plug it back in, it's not going to be calibrated 100% right, and it's just not going to run, and you're going to have to buy a new throttle body. So if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next week.